There are a lot of videos that share male expats or couples that decided to make the move from the USA to Medellin. But what about the women that have left the United States to call Medellin home? I previously released an interview where an American woman of Colombian descent moved from Ohio to settle back in this city. It was great to get her point of view. In today's video, we're going to take it a bit further. Our guest is a fellow YouTuber that goes as La Gringa Latina and has fully embraced the Latin culture. On her channel, she documents her life here in Medellin as an all-American girl that has gone full Latina. Let's get to meet her and see why she chose Medellin.
So what made you choose Medellin as your home?
So I initially had a friend in college who was from here. I went to school among many Colombians, so that was how Colombia came on my radar in college. And I had one friend in particular that was from Medellin. His family lives in Copacabana in the north, and he would just always talk about Medellin, how much he loved his hometown, and I would like look up pictures, and I was like, oh my God, it looks so beautiful. I want to go there. And despite the fact that I wanted to study abroad in Colombia, and that not working out, I went to Lima, Peru for a year. That was my plan B. And in my time there, I visited Medellin twice and actually I found out that I have a cousin who lives here, but it's like political family on my mom's side, and he's married to a Colombian, so he welcomed me with open arms. The first time I visited was in December of 2015, and then the second time was 6 months later in July of 2016. It's always spring here, so but December is a really great time to visit always. So I had an amazing time that first time, and it just was checking off all my boxes with what I preferred personally. To move to a city is a very personal decision. So there were many places in Latin America that I fell in love with their cultures and their people, but it didn't feel like the right decision to live there permanently or long term. And this place, every day, I'm just so happy that I know that this was the best decision I ever made, was to move here.
What makes you feel that way? Or do you have any particular events or kind of points of reference that make you say, yeah, this is something that was kind of different, that I wasn't expecting, that made me feel welcomed here, or made me feel like this is a place that I could call home?
Well, that's hard to answer just without going into like my own life story, just because from a young age I was always really good at Spanish. Spanish was my always the language that I studied, and I knew I wanted to be fluent. I knew that Colombia in general has one of those dominant cultures in Latin America, and so much life is just bursting from the seams from this country. And Medellin in particular, of the top reasons that I love this city would be the weather being so beautiful, just goddamn gorgeous every single day, how cheap it is to live here. The cost of living is very low, and how comfortable I felt here. So I'm blonde, I'm tall and blonde, right? I stick out. So, and there are blonde Colombians though. So like not everybody, some people, because I'm super tall too, but they won't like stare at me like I'm an alien, as I might be treated in other countries in Latin America that are not so accustomed to seeing lighter, light-skinned, light-haired, blue-eyed people, because there are Colombians that are like that. So the population is not so homogenous in that way, and that helps me feel better, just fitting in and walking down the street. But beyond that, like, people here are very open and friendly at all times. They're very, very hospitable and polite, and will always be trying to help you out, even if, just out of the goodness of their hearts. So, there's good people and bad people everywhere, but I definitely felt well received by this city, and I think part of that is due to the fact that for so many years they didn't have any tourists here, and so Colombians really want to be shedding those negative stereotypes and get back to a place of being able to share their pride for this country, this land, this city, and that's just a beautiful thing, I think.
You said that the Colombians have been very welcoming and interested in sharing with you as a tourist or as an outsider what makes their country unique and beautiful. Just like your friend from college, and I'm sure all the paisas here are like, oh, you're a stranger, you're a foreigner.
Yeah.
Try this food or try this thing, or you must go here and see this.
Yeah.
What are the sort of experiences that Colombians have shared with you that made you feel like this is kind of cool and different than what you were accustomed to in the US?
Well, that takes me back to like my first impression when I first visited. So when I was visiting, I was living in Peru. So I sort of was comparing these two different Latin American countries because I knew I wanted to live abroad after I graduated. And so one thing that I did notice that was like very notable to me was their sense of unity as a country. It's something that's so beautiful that their pride of no matter what color you are, what religion, how much money you make, like everybody is just proud to be Colombian, and you are proud of your roots and the place where you're from because you love it, and you take care of it, and that just was very appealing. Sometimes as an American, we just get sick of Americans. Like there's a lot of and I won't say that there's not a lot of like internal conflict here either. Every country has its own splits and divides, and people don't agree. But just when it comes down to it, everyone is very united is the word that comes to mind. Especially like for when there's like a soccer game or something, and everyone's wearing the shirt and everyone's supporting, and it's just cool to see
the whole country rally behind the flag, rally behind being Colombian.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that really stuck out to me, and I noticed throughout Latin America it's kind of that way in comparison to the United States.
Yeah.
Like you meet people who in America, right? You went to college in New Jersey, and people who were born in America will still claim to be of Colombian descent or to be Ecuadorian or Dominican, and they haven't really kind of assimilated into America fully. Here you could have one or two generations and everybody's Colombian and they completely identify around being Colombian. And I find that to be kind of refreshing. It gives a better sense or a stronger sense of unity amongst the people, regardless of where they immigrated from, because most of the people here are immigrants.
It's not a pride of like saying I'm better than you or anything. That's something different, because I think that the word proud, for instance, sometimes has a negative connotation with like, oh, I'm better than you or something. But no, they're proud of where they come from because they love where they come from, and that love is they want to share it with the world, and that's really beautiful. And when it comes to people like us, in our country of the United States, it's inevitable this mixing of the Latin cultures and non-Latin culture people, right? With the rates of how much the Latin population is growing, right? So, you told me before that like your wife is Venezuelan, so I feel like it's inevitable that there will be more people like us that are more exposed to or even enmeshed in Latin culture, wanting to visit or even living here, having families in Latin America, etc. And so continuing for Colombians to continue loving on their country and their culture and sharing it with people is only going to be like catching up to the times, I think. And when we're talking about like economically, like this country opening up to tourism and all of that is just like such a positive effort in especially changing negative stereotypes that are outdated, ignorance,
So now professionally that you're here in Colombia, I know that you've kind of taken a position of being an advocate to the outsiders as to what makes this country beautiful, but you're also, a key player in the Medellin world, where you're now functioning as a liaison or as a guide or help for people who are thinking of making the same transition as you. What sort of services do you provide, and what makes your touch fairly unique?
I help travelers and expats to bridge the divides created by language barriers and or cultural barriers. I came to this country already speaking Spanish because I knew that I really wanted to be fluent. That was a really big goal of mine in college, and I did so by the end of my year studying abroad in Peru. It was actually Peruvians that taught me Spanish, and Salvadorans as well. But in my time here, yes, I've had to pick up, how they speak, etc. And like you said before this interview of, me moving here alone, yeah, that was really scary. Like I like downplay it, because I knew that this is what I wanted in my whole body. I just knew like Medellin was my future, even though I didn't know how it was going to happen. But yeah, I had to overcome so many fears of just assimilating, and it was all by myself. And I didn't have any American friends, or, I came here, I was working for a company and it didn't work out, but I stayed. And so, my hope is, and I see this, what's the word? Burgeoning population of expats and English speakers who just want to see what the talk is about Medellin, and whether it's to just be a digital nomad and spend a month here, or whether it's to see if this isn't the place they want to spend maybe a year, or maybe this is the place they want to set up their business, or maybe this is the place they want to set up their family. Like, for whatever level it is, I want to help that population of people, the non-Colombians, and it could be Hispanic, doesn't have to be English speakers, but anyone who's not Colombian who wants to come here, and they need help with navigating, again, with the language barrier or the cultural barriers. Yeah, so I have had to learn so much on my own, and in particular with the cultural barriers and how those differences play out here in Colombia.
You have an example of that?
Yes.
Like in a story format, like if you could tell a story about one of those cultural differences.
Well, there's just like lots of little things. Like, for instance, when you go to the store and they like tie like the plastic bags, like I'm like, why do you do that? Then I can't open my bag. But like,
why do they do that?
I don't know, because I don't know. It's not practical because they don't want anything to fall out of the bag. I don't know. Or like just gender roles with dating, like who pays, like men here are more intense than men in the States, or what we perceive, so it's all just a learning experience, life learning experience. And I recommend for people in their 20s in the States to have an abroad living experience, if even for 1 year, like a little gap year, just to experience it. Because I knew from an early age that as an American, we don't get the kind of cultural exposure to other countries such as Europeans do, because their countries are all super small and super close. So you just take a train and you're in Switzerland. You know what I mean? It's like, and everybody there is like bilingual, trilingual at least, right? So I knew that I wanted that experience in my 20s, and it's turned into something even bigger, mainly because, yeah, like I have this ability to garner attention on YouTube, and I have this message for people. So in getting back to answering your question, I want to help service those people that want to follow my footsteps, basically, with learning Spanish, moving here, visiting, whatever, so that they have a positive experience and can take away positive perspectives from that experience, which second-handedly helps the Colombians. Really, that's what they want too,
So you did touch on something that I thought was rather interesting, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about that more. When you compare the US to Europe, the people in Europe seem to be generally more cultured than Americans, right? Because their countries are like the size of our states.
Yeah.
And it's a train ride, a bus ride, a $60 flight into a full new immersion, right?
Yeah.
So what did you get out of immersing yourself in Latin America, Peru, Colombia, that you feel Americans are missing, and if they had that exposure, might change how we are as a nation or as people?
Yeah. I mean, the United States is and always has been an immigrant nation, you know, unless you're Native American, you know, you're not from America, right? Or your family isn't. So, and I think that as our country goes through different waves of immigrants coming in, we seem to forget like the value that different cultures bring, you know? Because the United States and how it is geographically, you know, we're bordered by two oceans, you know, Canada in the north and Mexico in the south. And I think that we're a mix of cultures, and yet we are so divided sometimes, you know? And that's in total contrast to what I was talking about before with the united feeling of Colombians, you know?
But they also are a nation of immigrants.
Yeah.
It's the indigenous,
like
the Spanish,
exactly.
the Africans from the slave trade,
Yeah.
the Europeans that came over from World War II.
Yes.
But somehow it seems to have gelled into a unified Colombia.
Yeah.
But
Just
our
like
United
Venezuela,
States,
same thing.
Same
Yeah.
thing. Brazil, same thing. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
where. Argentina, same thing. No matter where you go in South America, it seems like the people, even though they're separate, have somehow come together and formed a new unified vision of who we are as a people.
It's the attitude that I really just hate about, that is ingrained in certain parts of the United States, not all, is that the lie that the United States is somehow dominant, that English is somehow dominant, that because we have so much cultural diversity that we don't need to go anywhere else. As if getting Korean food is like, oh, down the street, like, oh, that's cultural enough for me. Like, like I interact with like the owner who's Korean, and oh, that's my cultural doses for the day. Like, no. I feel like so much of the world interacts among those multicultural lines that Americans that don't, I'm just kind of like, wake up, you know?
I think what's kind of unique about you, in my opinion, is that I think many people in America would kind of look at you as the stereotypical American woman, right? Just all based on appearance, right?
Oh, and appearance. Yeah,
appearance.
Totally. I'm the like cheerleader bimbo, like sorority chick. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
But just I would say not that those things are necessarily like the American tropes, but I feel like when if a person were to think of an American woman, they would, like, a picture of you might come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your perspective on that, and who you are, is completely
The
opposite.
book cover does not match the book.
It doesn't match that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of curious to me, like, how did you, as a girl who grew up in Nebraska, become this person who felt the need to be culturally stimulated? What was kind of tugging at you that made you leave Nebraska to go to the East Coast and then venture even further?
Yeah.
Because that's not typical.
Yeah, it's not. I also did not come from a typical background either. So from a young age, I just knew I was a little bit different. But in more specific terms, my parents were both Catholic, and so they wanted me and my sisters to have a Catholic education, and so they always sent us to private Catholic schools. There's the private system, which is the Catholic schools, and then the public school system, which was more low-income families and more diversity there, and better classes, in my opinion, more diversity of courses. And I came from a family that was not super rich, but I went to school with a lot of girls, like I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, and all of those girls came from very privileged families. And so looking back now, I mean, I didn't even realize then, but I think that I was sort of judged for not having money in that way, which sort of speaks to what Colombians might experience with classicism here. They don't have so much of the problem of racism, it's more classicism, but being judged based off of how much money you make. And so I was always on the outside of like the social circle. I was never like a cool girl or anything. And so I would socialize with people of color and people who had different perspectives, people whose parents were immigrants. And I just really enjoyed learning, like, just who wants to be friends with, these, bitchy girls over here who just think that you need to have the Vera Bradley lunchbox to be cool. And it's like, okay, I didn't gravitate towards that because I'm down to earth and authentic. And so there's that, but then also, like, I came from an abusive household. So that was the push that made me go to college very far. Like, I wanted to get far away. That was a push factor. And then, falling in love. I had an amazing college experience. It was a pull factor to come here, for sure. So, in a nutshell.
Why I'm kind of laughing on the inside is my background is virtually the same. Catholic schooled my entire life, from pre-K to my first year of college. And it was kind of that thing. My parents wanted me to kind of be in this environment, Christian environment, because they stood by that, and they also wanted me to be in a private school. And the Catholic schools were the right balance of both, right? Like, because there's also the non-secular private schools that have no religion aspect, but they wanted us to have a religious aspect. But in that, I was exposed to kids that weren't typical of my neighborhood, I would say. Right, I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, so people look like me.
Where did you grow up?
In Jamaica, Queens.
Okay.
And fortunately, my elementary school was pretty diverse, which was great, but my high school wasn't. It was mostly like Italian and Irish Catholics, and I was one of 7 black males in my year of 750 students. So diversity wasn't really that wide there. But just listening to that being kind of your story and you looking at it from the perspective like, well, I don't necessarily fit into this group, and I'm kind of curious about those people who are different because I feel sort of different. So I wonder what their perspective is. It's pretty telling of how you've continued to kind of like chase that curiosity of what makes people who they are and what makes me who I am.
And when you're young, you hate being different. And then when you're older, you're like, I love the fact that I'm different. So I love this city for all the reasons that I have stated before. Weather, and also like the size of the city is not massive. Also geographical location of the hemisphere. It's very close to countries all over Latin America. If you wanted to visit, there's Cuba, there's Mexico, there's Brazil, there's Argentina. So that's really cool. And Colombia itself is so diverse. I said to myself before I moved here that if I didn't have the money to visit all these other Latin American countries that I wanted to, sticking with Colombia would be fine with me. I'd be still satisfied because Colombia has every possible terrain, that there exists. There's, islands, deserts, oceans, mountains, plains, everything, So there's so much to discover in Colombia, just in Colombia itself. But Medellin as a city to live in, I made a video specifically about this on my channel of like 10 reasons why it's the best city to live in for so many reasons.
And if somebody wanted to kind of take the same jump that you have, what would be their best way of getting in contact with you and you helping them?
Yeah. So if you were like me and you really felt like you're alone, you're not alone at all. There's so many people here, and yet so many people still have a hard time with figuring out how to make it here, or just how to make the best use of their time here. So that is what I want to help you out with, viewer. And you can reach me by going to my website, lagringalatina.com. And right there's a button you can click to book a session with me, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. And I can help you in a variety of ways, whether it's you have a business you want to see if you want to set it up here, or maybe you're already here and you just need help with anything from me helping you figure out how to find an apartment to translations, anything that you need help with setting up your life here, I guess.